Hello and good afternoon to Kate. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to see you again, Dan.
You too. So, Kate, we're going to get into all things Tembo, but also we want to talk about you, your career, your life and journey as an entrepreneur. Take a deep breath. um, to start off with, for those that aren't aware, and I'm sure they're few and far between, just if you don't mind introducing yourself and what the business does, please.
Yeah, sure. So, Kate Disley, I am founder and CEO of TEMBO. TEMBO is an event support agency. We service clients in lots of different ways, mostly marketing, but also conference production, consultancy, training. We have an in house agency that does PPC, digital, that sort of thing, and also can deliver all event campaigns. And yeah, but we're best known for kind of like our freelancer placement and our perm recruitment.
Thank you. So, we're going to talk about the Tembo journey, but before that, before I think 2014 or the last 10 years, just want to understand a bit about your background. I'm always interested to know sort of where maybe the desire, if it was a desire or an ambition to own your own business, do your own thing, sort of came from. So, start where you wish to start, whether it's from your childhood or after that, or school or college. Give us a flavour of Kate a few years before when you started the current business that you're running, please.
Sure. So I did an English and theatre studies degree. So nothing to do with events at all. And like most people, I fell into
Yeah,
events.
heard that a lot.
Um, but I always think like a lot of people in events like the drama, and that is my theatre studies side. You know, we build up to something, there's a big show where it all comes together. So I think that that kind of plays through everything. But the way that it happened essentially is I was trying desperately to get into TV or any sort of media back in the days before the internet. And I lived in Southampton, so it was just not going to happen. So I ended up taking a job at a youth development organization called World Challenge Expeditions, from which they kind of moved me around, and I ended up in their marketing department writing their newsletters. And from there I started to look for another role, and I think something was misheard from expedition to exhibitions on the phone, and I ended up in an interview at UVM for a marketing assistant role. And
Right.
I was at UVM for 10 years, worked my way up from marketing assistant to head of marketing, working across loads of different shows that people will have heard of: Technology for Marketing, Call
Hmm.
Center Expo, LIW, International Convex was my absolute baby. So I think I was looking after that for 6 years. All in all, that was the longest one that I had. Yeah. And then got to the got to 10 years at UBM, and I had my daughter, and I'm a single mum, and I reached a kind of career plateau at UBM, and it just all those things combined meant I needed a change. Stepped out, and initially I knew I wanted to launch my own business. I knew I wanted to build something that I could be proud of, that I could put me into. And yes, so I stepped out, became a contractor myself, worked on Spring Fair, Pure, the great events, mostly all at what is now Hive, but back then was Eye to
Sure.
Eye and Essential. And kind of got stuck in the cycle a bit. And it was great. Every time somebody left or something happened, they'd give me an event because it was a safe pair of hands. After a while, though, I knew I kind of again needed to move on, but it had given me an idea for how Tembo started, which was matchmaking experienced event marketers with event organizers. And so that's how it started. And initially, it was like most businesses, me, and then gradually grew with other people, lower level, then higher level.
Sure, which we'll talk about. I'm interested. Thank you for. It's fascinating, just taking you back to the beginning of what you said. That essentially it was a mistake that you were
Yeah.
speaking about an exhibition role, rather than something else, but that you just went with it. Tell me about and you referenced it a little bit about UBM and your experience on Convex. What did that tell you about the industry and why you felt that you might like to stay in it for the long term?
So I think, like everyone, once you're in events, oh, you either love it or hate it. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, I didn't know that the industry existed. And so working on Convex was, I just loved it so much. I loved everything about events. The people in the events industry are fantastic. Everyone is so supportive of everyone else. And so when I came to leave, having worked on Convex, I had an amazing little black book. I had lots of experience of actually doing the marketing of loads of different industries. UBM had given me a really good foundation in management experience. So I was really lucky, really, all those things combined.
Sure. Thank you, because I'm always interested to know what gives someone the confidence to strive out by themselves, right? Some people have it, it's innate. They've never worked for anyone else and they just do it and they're risk takers. Others go down the route that you've gone, you've got some experience, and then it sort of, I guess, happened over a period of time. Um, Still, it's a leap of faith, right? And
Absolutely.
what gave you that? I'm assuming you thought you had a good idea, but it's a risk. What gave you that confidence that you felt, I'm going to move away from all the securities or perceived security, shall we say, because COVID showed us there's no real secure,
Yeah.
100% security, perceived securities of having and being employed. What gave you
Mhm.
that, drive and confidence to take that risk?
I would say to a certain extent it was necessity.
Okay.
Like I couldn't see another route forward at the time. There obviously were other routes forward, but that was the one that most matched my skill set. And I knew, although launching my own business wasn't kind of something that I'd actually gone out to set out to do, it had always been part of my DNA that I'd always been thinking about, and certainly within UBM as well. I'd like to think that I was always trying to come up with new business ideas, innovative ways of doing things. So I think it was kind of necessity, but I also took it quite slowly. So I didn't I did the contracting, was really, I was well paid for it and
Sure.
working less time, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
So the risk the risks came later, I think.
Interesting. Okay, which we'll talk
Yeah.
about, because I'm sure there's lots of people, and I know because I get feedback from this podcast, that are listening, that are in that in this moment, potentially making that decision. They might be contracting, they might be employed, and they feel like, what, I want to give this a go. You know, what advice would you give to them if someone's listening to your story now?
Take it slowly, and prove your concept yourself first before you think about taking on any investment or even getting other people involved. I would try it out yourself first. I've seen
Yeah.
people take lots of investment before, and that's pressure in itself. You've essentially got another boss, so you need to think
True.
about what's right for you. It is lonely, so you need to build up that network around you. So whether that be, I would say, definitely having a coach or a mentor is really good. Having someone that can challenge you and keep you on track, and someone that you feel accountable to, even if you're
Sure.
paying them. And then also just building up almost like those little friendship groups, those little pockets where
Mm.
you can actually try out ideas with other people or vent.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need to get it all off our
Sure.
chest and just, check different things.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, positively, we live in a world where those sort of communication channels, there's a plethora of them, right? So whether it's WhatsApp, Slack, all the different networking groups. So the business, if I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken, you set up, it was around 2014, was that right?
That's right, yeah.
What were some of
And
the
it's
early challenges that you faced? Again, if someone is listening to this, what were some of the things that, in the first few months you had to overcome?
yes. I would say knowing what you don't know. I mean, and that's still a challenge as the business grows. It's a different environment. You don't know what you don't know. So it certainly was kind of learning from experience. Understand your proposition, understand the problem it's solving. That might sound like relatively common sense stuff, but I see some people do it where, they've gotten just passionate about something and haven't necessarily thought if it works for other people. Make sure you cost everything out and you understand your profit margins. Like, that you factored in all of your overheads, that you factored in that you need to pay yourself as well. That's something that I didn't really think about early days. And yeah, and don't be afraid to raise your prices early days as well.
Sure. Well, that's a good point as well. If you're out by yourself, you feel like you really need the business,
Yeah,
then sometimes it's a race to the bottom, isn't it? In terms of reputation
absolutely.
as well. It doesn't always help.
Yeah. And not only that, if you're not funded to stay in business, you're not going to be around to provide that service that other people need. So you do need to kind of eat first.
Sure. Do you feel that you and in general female founders of businesses face bigger challenges? And do you think that's still the case compared to when it was 10 years ago?
I actually think it's easier for female founders outside of the big corporates and probably the small to medium sized businesses than
Sure.
it is if you're within it, because we've already stepped away, taken ourselves out of
Yeah.
that structure that sometimes is set against you as a woman. There is still a little bit of an old boys club, and that's just the way it is at the moment. It is gradually changing, which is nice to see. Fewer golf days,
Oh, women
fewer.
play golf.
Women
Very good
do
women
play
golfers.
golf, but I
I know what you
mean,
mean.
you
Yeah,
see
I know
the
what you
pictures. Yeah, it's not 50-50 for sure.
Sure.
So yeah, I do think it is still a challenge, but there are more and more of us every year. So we're creating our own little network, and I'm part of Women in Exhibitions as well. And that is a fantastic network for women in the industry.
Sure, which we'll talk more about over the next few minutes. Let's talk about the growth or the journey of the business, Tembo, over the last 10 years. Because, like any business, doesn't matter how big, small, what industry, it's rarely a straight line, and a straight curve upwards. Can you sort of bring to life some of the stages? If I look at your website now, and I think I said to you in our pre-call, you seem to be doing lots of different things, some great things in relation to the events industry, but it wasn't always that way, was it? You started with, I think, one area, specifically people and I guess recruitment, and now you've expanded. So take us on that journey, how you've ended up where you've ended up.
Yeah, so I think initially at first when it's just yourself, it's easier, and then I suppose the model I started out with was more like the impact agency model that I have now in house. So it was working with a couple of marketing execs actually to provide like a team approach. That proved to be just a little bit too difficult right at the beginning. So stepped back from that and then just focused on the pure kind of matchmaking side of things. So I guess the first step was when I actually recognized I needed someone to help me. So the first person that came on board was someone to support me with admin, just doing the invoicing, that sort of thing, because I was working in the business at that point and didn't have a lot of time. And then it got to a stage where obviously you kind of get to a stage where I can only earn so much myself and as a team. So I started to think about what were the revenue opportunities for us? And with kind of like the freelancer placement, what I, I would get into conversations quite often where organisers were looking for someone who was super experienced, didn't need their hand holding, but wanted them to send emails and make website amends, which these super experienced people are very costly, and quite frankly, they don't want to do that anyway. So we launched an agency which provides almost like a team approach. You have a marketing manager and marketing exec working on everything together, and there's a marketing director overseeing. So that was probably the next phase, and that unfortunately was going probably about 18 months before COVID hit. It was doing
Right.
really, really well. And then we lost 75 to 80% of our business overnight. And that didn't really change for at least 2 years, just over 2 years. So Impact had a little bit of a dip. We just before an ex-colleague of mine, Claire Tullock, approached me and said, "Oh, like your model, I think this could work for conference producers as well." And so we set that up together. So she runs that aspect of it, and that has had phenomenal growth. And even through COVID, it kept growing because people were still looking for conference producers.
Sure.
So that bolt on was probably the next thing. And I tried a couple of other bolt ons, to be totally frank and open, didn't work.
Well, that's
And
interesting
then,
because you have got to try these things, right? Again, just a bit of learning for people that are listening. And I know it's a cliche, and you hear it in all the podcasts about, don't be afraid to fail and try things, but it is true, right? You have got to. There's not everything's going to work, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about if it doesn't happen.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there are lots of different reasons why something will fail. It could be that you haven't put enough time into it. And at some points, you might have to say, well, I'm never going to be able to put enough time into this to make it work. So I need to stop. It might be that the just proposition is too confusing, or there just might not be the audience for it. It might not be the need that you think it is. And so, yeah, I mean, we've tried several different things and they haven't quite worked. Sometimes it's been that we haven't had the right person driving it, because you do need to have a bit of entrepreneurial spirit in you.
Sure.
You've got to be hungry to grow stuff and succeed and network and sell and all those different things. So it doesn't always work out. And then I suppose on the other side, the last two things that we've launched
Yeah.
have been through people approaching us. So one being Refresh, the consultancy. We were getting so many inquiries for marketing strategies and audits and that sort of thing, that we just thought, well, there's something here, let's go with it. And the same with Techniques, which is our training courses, exactly the same. And yeah, they're both doing really, really well. But like everything, they need time, they need focus to do them well.
Sure, thank you. And you've clearly built a solid and a good and positive reputation within the exhibition world and the events world. How do you go about doing that, do you think? Was there like is there like a tipping point where once you've had a few clients and they tell others that they've liked working with you? Again, just give us your view of how people go about doing that. What are some of the things that you've employed, tactics? I mean, listen, you help run other people's marketing campaigns. So so people might
Mhm.
expect that you're good at marketing yourselves, but is it luck, judgment? Give us a view.
To be totally honest, we have been very lucky for a long time, and that most of our business walked towards us, and it was completely word of mouth. Like I said, the
Right.
the events industry is fantastic, and we do talk to each other, and we do share ideas and opportunities together. So that, to a certain extent, I was obviously really lucky with, well, working at UBM. I think most people in the industry at some point have worked at UBM. So there was a big network there already. And yeah, my little black book from Convex was really, really helpful there. And I'm just a bit shameless on LinkedIn. I like to like to link in with everyone.
Sure.
So yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of it, actually. Speaking opportunities are really good. Getting involved with associations, doing a bit of pro bono work for associations, that sort of thing, and building those relationships.
Sure, thank you. You mentioned COVID, and I don't want to dwell on that time too much, but it'd be remiss of me not to to ask you a couple of questions. I mean, okay, it might seem an obvious one, but you as a business owner specifically during that time, how did you? What was the effect, and how did you sort of recover from that?
Yeah, so it was so hard, ridiculously hard. I think like most people, it's one of the biggest challenges I've ever faced. And I think one of the hardest aspects was keeping that poker face for your team and not to show, you know, how dire the whole situation was. I mean, we did have to make 2 redundancies. That was horrific. The first time I'd had to do that. That's not,
Yeah,
it's one of those milestones, but it's not one you ever want to have to
no,
do. And I suppose I reached out to a lot of people in the industry. I had a lot of those Zoom calls over a cup of tea or a glass of wine, just kind of, what can you do? And sharing ideas. But it did get to a point where, there are no ideas left. It is what it is. There's
yeah,
just got to wait for things to turn around. And I think we have had a bumpy time coming out because when we initially opened up, everyone needed us because they'd let all their staff go. So
okay,
business was booming
yeah,
straight off. But I didn't really have the infrastructure at the time to deal with it. And we struggled to find people as well because people had left what was going on with Brexit, people had left the country. So we had a bit of a boom. And then it all went quite quiet again because people had come in house. And I think everyone was kind of just checking to see what the lay of the land was. And then I think, and that's probably gone on for the last, up till about Christmas last year. And then it slowly started to change where everything feels like it's building again. I always say it's a bit like hungry hippos with everyone
yeah,
buying each other up at the moment.
yeah,
There's a lot
that's
of
true.
movement and it seems just like a lot of energy in the industry, which is really exciting. So, yeah, here for it.
And how do you, as a leader, an owner, or founder, or CEO, deal with moments of self doubt? Because there must be moments. Obviously, COVID, but just generally, all leaders of all shapes and sizes feel it. What do you do to remain calm, positive, and move forward?
I think, like I said, it's good to show your team that things aren't great, that you don't want to act like, everything's absolutely fine and over happy. And
Yeah,
to a certain extent, you have to be the one there for them. So there is a bit of a mask that goes on. And so I will take myself away and know that when I need my time and when I need to sit down and just plan everything out and take a few deep breaths, I know myself well enough now to know when I need to do that. And teaching your team how to do that as well. Like,
sure.
to you have to be really resilient and a few things just need to bounce off you. Not take it personally is what I've learned over the years. It's just kind of just keep going and you know say sorry even when you know it's not your fault.
Done that a few times. And I know that you have a business partner as well. Is that right?
I do, yeah.
So tell me about that relationship and how important that is to you.
That has been incredibly, incredibly important. So I met Mark whilst I was at I2I. He was mentoring. He has owned his own businesses before. He launched, I think, his marketing agency when he was 29. So a really accomplished businessman. And the way that it's helped me is I had that accountability, like I mentioned with the coach. You have someone that's holding you to account all the time that has been on the journey with you, so understands what phase you're at. And he's always telling me that, stop looking down, look up, look up. You've got to be looking ahead, not looking
Yeah,
down where you are. And so he's been invaluable and obviously a dear friend now. But I thoroughly, thoroughly recommend having just someone that's on your side.
yeah, makes sense.
It's really important.
You started the business, as you said, it was just yourself in 2014. How many staff do you have at the moment?
I think we're around 25.
So I
And
guess
then we have our
Sorry.
practice as well.
Yeah. So I guess it's fair to say that you've had to grow as a leader. Your style might have changed. Tell us about that journey. How do you think you've evolved over the years, your leadership style?
Yeah, so I think again, it's turning into a bit more of a mentor.
Right.
People look for you to have all the answers, and that's good. And you do need to probably at least be able to access the answers. But also, it's about empowering those people to find the answers themselves. So, what I've realized is how valuable it is to have people that can answer their own questions and come to me as a last resort, so that they power through, they know what they need to do, and they come to me to tell me what they did, what happened, and what they did to resolve it. And, sometimes it'll be the right thing, sometimes it'll be the wrong thing. But I am a strong believer that you only learn from experience. So the more of that, the better.
Sure. Thank you. Just want to turn our attention back to something that we were speaking about earlier, and you mentioned women in exhibitions. And I know you've been vocal about supporting the advancement of women in the events industry. Can you share a bit more about your work in that area, how you've been involved, maybe for those that don't know about women in exhibitions, what it does, and how people can get involved?
Sure. So initially, I started working with the UK chapter. So I was on the board looking after the marketing. So we helped for a couple of years with the marketing, and that was fabulous just to build up my knowledge and understanding. It grew my network. I actually reconnected with people that I'd worked with before, like in UBM. It was really powerful. And then since then, I've met Oana, who founded Women in Exhibition. She's based in the Netherlands and works at MECC. And she is an absolute inspiration, and I adore her. Like, her enthusiasm and dedication to promoting women in the industry is just second to none. And so we've been helping on the Women in Exhibition Summit. So the first one happened last year. So we helped out with the marketing and the conference production on that. And we're doing the same this year for the event in Milan. And last year, I mean, I would really encourage everybody, male, female, to attend. It was a brilliant networking opportunity, and the conference was just different. It was more open. Everyone was a bit more vulnerable and open to speaking about challenges and trying to find those solutions as well. And also, if you're kind of UK siloed, it was really good because I now have a network of people, a network of women essentially around the world. So that is an invaluable opportunity.
And that's Oana Sipka, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Just if people want to look her up, but I'll put a link in the description as well. Do you think it's easy to pinpoint some changes that you think needs to still be made within the events industry to foster more inclusion and diversity? Maybe not just for females, but across the board.
Yeah, well, definitely across the board. We definitely need people of a broader variety of backgrounds and races and religions. Absolutely, 100%. I think I was at a conference probably about a year ago where I spoke to, I think it's, and asked her whether, it was that people from different backgrounds, women and different races, were coming into the industry and then leaving, or whether it was that we just weren't attracting them in the first place. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's the former. So we're not keeping hold of these people. We're not showing them the route up. And probably because we don't actually have those people that look like them, that they can see, okay, there's a place for
Sure.
me here. That's where I'm going to get to. When I was at UBM, Jane Risby Rose was absolutely kind of so powerful in my development and urge to succeed, because I could see there was a woman who had a seat on the board. And I was like, oh, actually, I do have a route. And this is who I want to emulate. This is who I want to be.
Mm,
And the powers of role models and seeing yourself, it should not be underestimated.
yeah. No, you make a good point, and we've seen that clearly outside the events industry, the England's women's football team, for example, look at all the success they've had and the impact that's had on grassroots.
Yeah.
And even the Paralympics, I was reading about that and what that means as well for people. So you make a good point. You're privileged, I guess, to speak to a lot of senior people in the industry. Your team works across a number of disciplines in the trade show and exhibition industry. Talk to me about some trends that you're seeing maybe at the moment with some of the work that you're doing. Could be marketing, could be content that maybe you're particularly excited about. Just bring some of those to life, please.
Yeah. So I think as technology advances, we are seeing a lot of, say, marketing teams or marketing directors, people that are leading marketing teams, trying to make a decision on whether they need specialists or generalists.
Okay.
And that's a big thing in the industry, and it's quite a difficult one. I mean, I've worked in different companies where they've had different structures, and I don't really feel like we found the right answer quite yet. And certainly my colleague Claire is doing some research into this, who is coming across this discussion point time and time again. So, are we looking for an email specialist who can set up automations and dive into the database, or do we need someone that understands the audience more, understands it in a holistic way? And like I said, I don't think there's any right answer at the moment, and I suppose it depends on your organization. But if you go for the specialist routes, then my experience is that you have to have your processes set up. They have to be on point, so everybody knows what you're working to and how. Other things in the industry, like I said, I think there's a lot of energy in the industry at the moment. There's lots of launches going on, lots of people buying other people, and so big changes for different teams. I would say that we had a big bump at the beginning coming out of COVID, like huge salary rises, which
Yeah.
then kind of tapered off. It kind of dropped back down again. I would say that's on the rise again as everything evens out a bit. I can't think of what else. I suppose there is actually the outsourcing thing. So the freelancer side of things. Pre-COVID, we used to struggle quite a lot with everybody wanting freelancers in the office.
Interesting.
And a lot of our freelancers are mums who are working from home because
Sure.
that's their lifestyle now. Those are demands on them. And so that was always a bit of a challenging challenge point for us. But now there is more of an acceptance that people can work remotely, people can be held accountable remotely, and we have all of those tools like Zoom and Teams to keep on top of, how people are working. So I would say there's a bit more acceptance now, not completely. Also, use of agencies as well because of that, and I think that's a lead on that. I know Informa use quite a few agencies now.
Yeah, I was going to
For
ask you
stuff.
actually, from when you first set up to now, do you think like the acceptance of using freelancers and agencies like yourself has grown? I mean, I guess it has. You're still here, but do you think now that there's definitely been that tipping point and shift in people's
Yeah,
views?
yes, I do, and I think with COVID as well, everyone understands that they need to be a bit more agile and
Yeah,
not kind of rack up the overhead. So we need to be rolling with the event cycle and,
yeah,
padding up when we need to, and then reducing back down to, the bare bones when we can.
sure.
So I think definitely there's people are a lot more conscious. People who are budget holders are a lot more conscious of this these days. And yeah, it's just a different way of working.
Yeah, and I think there's an acceptance now that people. I think you referenced it a few minutes ago that freelancers are there by choice, right?
Yes.
Because COVID gave people a pause for thought and they thought, actually, I don't want to go back into employment. Maybe they lost their job, whatever. And this is a route I want to take. And so, by definition, there's a much stronger pool of freelance talent and skill set around. I
Yep.
maybe feel like 15, 20 years ago, if you said I was free, you were freelancing because you couldn't find a job. And I think that's
Yeah.
different. I think maybe that's different now. The perceptions have shifted, and actually, it's all right to say you're a freelancer because you've chosen that as your career. In your path. Would that be
Yeah,
fair to say?
absolutely. It's definitely a life choice
Yeah.
now. Like I said, we have a lot of who want to return back to the industry. They've got so much knowledge,
Mm.
but obviously juggling childcare is a nightmare. If you have kids, it's just you will know. But also, a lot of people moved out of London during COVID, so they don't want. I think everyone appreciates the countryside a lot more, and being able to get
Yeah.
out of town. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people that I know that have moved out of London and want to work remotely
Sure.
now, and freelancing just lends itself to that.
Absolutely. As we finish up, a couple of final questions. If you look back, could be Tembo, could be another part of your career or life. What's your proudest moment, do you think?
Um, well, we've won the AEO Supplier of the Year award twice. Those were pretty
Congratulations.
instrumental in the success of the business. So yeah,
Yeah.
those were really important events, I would say, for us
Yeah.
as a business. And to stand in front of your peers and with great businesses around you. Um, Hosting the AEO forum as well.
Okay.
That was really important to me. Sharing and being with my peers again. Yeah, I would say those are big moments. There's a day that when you first get your certificate of incorporation that is pretty special. Your
Yeah.
first sale is
Yeah.
is is pretty special.
Can you remember
And
your first sale? Can you remember your first?
goodness me, I think it was DMG.
Right.
Yeah, many years ago. Yeah, and actually, I worked with New Scientist Live.
Okay.
I mean, that was a complete highlight in itself. We actually spoke to the International Space Station live
Oh, wow.
from the
Yeah.
conference theatre. Yeah, so yeah,
That was a
that was
moment.
that was fantastic as well. Yeah, there are loads, absolutely tons. I'm really lucky to work in this industry.
Yeah. And what's next for, I guess, yourself and the business? Give us a flavour of exciting projects that people might see in the future.
Yeah, so I think more than anything, we just want to refine our offering now. I think,
Yeah.
we do a lot. And I think, you know, what I'd like to do is just ensure that we are delivering the best possible service from each of those business units, essentially. We will be looking more to working internationally.
Okay.
We do a lot of international events. Most of our clients are based in the UK, though. So I'd say at the moment it's probably 10% of our client base is international. I would like that to grow to 50%. So that's what we'll be looking towards over the next few
Sure.
years. World
Kate,
domination.
world domination. Well, that's a good place to end. Kate, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on everything that you've achieved to date. It's no mean feat starting a business, and even more so staying in business for 10
Absolutely.
years and through COVID. So
Yeah.
pat yourself on the back and the team. And we look forward to seeing how you're getting on in the future. So thank you very much today.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak today.